On today's episode, Paul Newsome, founder of Swim Smooth and swim partner to Brownie Fitness, one of the world's most experienced swim coaches, whose achievements include not only coaching elite athletes to great success, but also age groupers and beginners, as well as swimming the English Channel and winning the Round Manhattan swim event. Hey everyone, absolutely delighted to bring Series 2, Episode 2 of our podcast to you. And today we have a fantastic discussion with Paul Newsome, who's a partner of Brownie Fitness, really experienced swim coach of over 20 years, founded Swim Smooth, internationally recognized not only club in Perth in Australia, but also an international technology company that has some game-changing swim tech that we're introducing into Brownie Fitness within our platform. So Paul not only is a great guy, massively experienced in terms of swim coaching, but also a strategic partner of Brownie Fitness. And in this episode, we dive into techniques and strategies for dealing with the fear of open water swimming. We know from our squad and from the research that we've uncovered around the world that the open water swim is the biggest barrier to triathlon. And as an organization, we want to spread the joy and exhilaration of triathlon training and racing. And we want to help people overcome that fear. And in this episode, Paul gives some fantastic insights and tips and tricks. And I also share my story, so there's hope for everyone, of why I avoided triathlon for decades because of that fear of that gun going in that vast open ocean, and some of the traumas that I experienced and how I've overcome them to get to the point where I'm representing my country in my age group, which is incredible. So without further ado, sit back. I hope you really enjoyed this show and the insights and wisdom of Paul Newsome from Swim Smooth around dealing with the fear of open water swimming. Paul, thank you for joining us this morning. It's great to have you here all the way from Australia. Swim Smooth are a fantastic partner of ours, and today's show is all about addressing that number one barrier that we know between us that people have getting into triathlon, and that's the fear of open water swimming. So in your experience, what kind of tools, techniques, processes have you adopted to help people overcome this barrier and swim confidently at that first part of the triathlon?
Well, Pete, firstly, it's great to be here on the Brownlee Brothers fitness show. I'm really pumped by it. I figured I'd do something in style and get my Yorkshire tea. There we go. Look, ready for the chat.
I can tell you, the lads coming from Yorkshire, they use the same tea bag the whole day. So they start in the morning and they finish with the same tea bag. So they optimize everything.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yorkshire tea used to be very expensive over here in Australia, but it's come down to the proper price now, which is good. So yeah, I can't live without it myself. Anyway, but no, back to your question though about the open water swimming. Well, you very kindly divulged with me just before we started here that you had a couple of near drowning experiences yourself, and even though swimming has been in my blood since the age of 7 years of age, so I was actually doing I was actually racing, competing every weekend in small galas up there in Yorkshire, and but it took me until I was about at the age of 16 to actually have a go at doing my first ever triathlon, especially in the open water. That took place in Sheffield, and of all places. And it was a very daunting experience for me. I'd never wanted to go in the open water, even though I had a very strong swimming background, purely because I was actually really scared of being in the deep water. For me, it's a depth thing. If I can see really clearly all the way down to the bottom of the ocean, that scares and freaks the hell out of me, to be honest with you. And I've swum the English Channel in some pretty murky waters. I've swum around New York in some very dirty waters and stuff. But because they're all really murky, it doesn't really give me the sense of just how deep and vast the ocean is. So for me, that's a trigger which I can override, so long as it's not ultra clean. Most people like to swim in ultra clean open water, but I'm not one of those people. I don't mind if it's a bit cloudy, a bit dirty.
That's really interesting. So depth is a common one that comes up for me. My fear was being far from the shore.
Yeah,
it wasn't the depth. It wasn't sharks. It wasn't obstacles. It was simply the distance from being from in sea to land. So I guess there are quite a few concerns that people have. And I think there's two great examples.
Totally. You know, I was at I was working for Tri UK back in, this was before I actually emigrated over to Australia in 2001, it would have been. And they had the Llanberis half Ironman. This is before 70.3. So the Llanberis half Ironman, first one there. And the day before, I was doing some wetsuit testing for a range of different manufacturers. I think it was like a 220 Triathlon magazine review. And I remember going in there and this old slate mine, and even though it's or slate quarry, I should say, as you started swimming off, you could literally just see it disappear down into the inky depths. And I was really scared. I was really freaked because earlier on that day, somebody had come up to me and told me this story about how I think it was an aeroplane had crashed during World War II into this vast lake, and they never recovered the bodies. And all I could think about when I was swimming around was this dead skeleton or zombie man coming up from underneath and grabbing my ankle.
This is a really important thing. I think we should dial into this. So how did you overcome? So you obviously set off from the shore, the gun goes, you know, thousands of people experience this, heart rate's jacked, you're pumped, the adrenaline's going, you're baptized. But how can you remember in that moment how you overcame that fear of skeletons rising or the depth of the water? Can you?
On that particular occasion, because I was doing this wetsuit review, I actually made a big beeline for the shore and just like have a proper hyperventilation. But had it been in a race, you know, I had a similar sort of, when I started this round Manhattan Island swim, so it's a 48 kilometer or 28 and a half mile swim around New York City. I was actually what spurred on a little bit of anxiety there was not just the notion of swimming that far, but it was also very cold. It's 14 degrees Celsius. Right. And it's a non-wetsuited swim. So you're only allowed your little budgie smugglers or your bathers, whatever you want to call them. And I remember having a little bit of a panic attack at that point. Sure. And in order to actually calm myself down in the middle of a race, I just went back to absolute basics. So one of the little teaching methods that I have is to actually help somebody to overcome their fear of running out of breath or running out of air when they're swimming. It's a very simple exercise. You take a breath to the side and you actually say in the water in time with your stroke, bubble, bubble, breathe, bubble, bubble, breathe. Now, I know that sounds super basic, but most people tend to hold on to the breath underneath the water. And if you can get them to actually say bubble in the water, firstly, it helps them to exhale. So just by saying bubble will make you exhale underneath the water. But it also gives you like a bit of a distraction mechanism as well. So you're actually saying in the water bubble, and you're not thinking about the things that are freaking you out. So when I was swimming around Manhattan, that's exactly what I did. Was I was thinking I'm cold, I'm stressed, I'm tense. But I just say, calm down, here we go. Bubble, bubble, breathe. 1, 2, 3, bubble, bubble, breathe. And it really helped to calm me down. And you know, I was lucky on that particular event to actually win that one. So even such a simple strategy like that can work for an athlete of you know, of any level.
And that is a great insight. I mean, even someone of your standard in that moment was able to had a panic attack. So that's, you know, thanks for sharing that, because
no worries.
You know, for the first 3 triathlons that I ever did, I always completed them, but what would normally be a 12-minute swim ended up being an 18 or a 19-minute swim. And in fact, in one, I'd like to talk to you about that bubble breathe a little bit more, because it is the breathing that tends to go. The heart rate goes high, you get hypoxic, you can't take the breath in. The only thing you can do, and in fact, I remember doing one triathlon, and I'm sharing here with everyone, that I rolled on my back and I was like sculling backwards, and 2 guys came past me and I was going faster than them doing this on my back. And they're saying, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just trying to get through it." Because I'd lost my breathing control altogether. It had completely gone. And there was nothing that I could do other than roll on my back and just calmly kind of caress the water and to get my heart rate back under control. But that, you know, so I think there's a good tip. What if in the middle of a race, and it's happened to a lot of people, you lose control of your breathing? So you're saying, it's gone. You cannot get it back. It's now, you know, you're on your back. What sort of strategies would you put in place at that point when you've lost it?
Well, I think, the mere notion that you had the awareness yourself, Pete, there to actually roll over onto your back and actually just sort of calm yourself down, that's a massive thing, because some people would literally get to the point where they'd start to go under, and the support post would come and rescue them or what have you. But the mere notion of rolling over onto your back and just trying to calm yourself down, even though there's thousands of other arms swimming around you and stuff.
Yes.
Or something you should feel ashamed of, because if it allows you to actually get through the swim and then get onto the bike and the run, then it's a win, right? Even though your time, like you said, might have been 6 or 7 minutes slower than you'd hoped, it's still a win for you, Pete, because you actually got out to the bike, and then you did the bike, and then you did the run. So it's still a win.
Yeah.
I think when you get into that state, I see my biggest thing when I'm coaching, I do a lot of video analysis and stroke correction. And I see time and time again people holding onto their breath underneath the water. And if they are very, very new swimmers, they'll often say to me, can I just warm up with a little bit of breaststroke first, and then we'll do the freestyle? I say, yeah, sure. But I'll actually film them doing the breaststroke, because funny enough, when they've actually got the control of just lifting the head up and looking forward and then popping the head down, usually you'll actually see them blowing bubbles in the water because they feel relaxed doing that stroke. When they come onto the freestyle, if it's a new stroke for them, typically you'll see them holding onto their breath. And I know for sure over there in the UK, a lot of kids still get taught to hold onto the breath, because they say, little Johnny, hold on to your breath, it'll improve your buoyancy. Well, it will, but if you're trying to sit horizontally in the water and you're holding onto the breath in the chest and lungs, that's going to lift you here and sink you down at the back. And that's one of the major problems that a lot of swimmers, adult swimmers getting into triathlon have, is that they have this low body position in the water. And if you're exacerbating that by holding onto your breath, it's just going to make it a lot worse. So learning to blow out underneath the water, and it is really basic, but there's an exercise that I do with those swimmers in that one-to-one scenario where we go down to the deep end of the pool. I'll get them to hold onto the steps with, their whole body's in the water. And I'll say, look, okay, hold on to these steps, pop your head underneath the water and just blow a long stream of bubbles from your mouth. And they'll say, okay, that's easy. And so they do that. And then they come back up. So now do the same thing from your nose. You go underneath the water. I get them to imagine themselves almost humming in the water. We'll do that a couple of times. And then I'll say, look, okay, can you feel, once you've actually been blowing out for 2 or 3 seconds, the pressure required to keep your head underneath the water starts to reduce? You can feel that, right? And they go, yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do now is, as you get to that point where you start to feel like the buoyancy drops, I just want you to let go of the steps and sink to the bottom. Now, a lot of people think, they come into a session with me to actually learn how to swim better, and here I am teaching how to sink better. But the process of teaching them how to sink better gets them actually regulating and controlling their breathing much better, such that when they start and go into their normal freestyle, they can really try and, put that into their stroke, and they want to feel like they're sighing gently in the water. So usually that sort of person that I'm doing that with at the start has actually said something to me in the 2 or 3 minute chat that we have before I do any filming with them. I've got this panic, I've got this anxiety, I've done an open water race, I've got pulled out, sort of thing. And I know just how important that 10 or 15 minutes that we spend just doing the sink downs is to their swimming. So that's why we spend so much time on it. And it's amazing how many people come back to me and say, of all those things I learned, things I've been trying to do, it was the breathing that made the big difference. And it's simple stuff, but you've got to breathe, right? you do it on the land, you go biking and running, you never ever hold on to your breath. Same thing wants to be true with your swimming. And if you can use it constructively like that, you will help to calm yourself down and get yourself into a nice little rhythm out there.
Amazing. Some other thoughts from your perspective and your experience. I'll share mine in a moment, but pre getting in the water. So a lot of people that I've spoken to don't have a pre-open water swim routine. So they basically go, vertical to horizontal, and the heart rate's, you're standing still. Okay, it might be a little bit high because you're just about to race or get in the water, but you've not prepared yourself for that shock of going, horizontal and fast. So any tips for people that are listening and watching on pre-race strategy to make sure that you are prepared for what's to come?
I think heart rate, as you touched on there, is a really important thing, because obviously when you're stood around waiting to actually enter into the water, yes, the heart rate's going to be up a little bit, but it's nowhere near as high as what it's going to be in 30 seconds time when the gun's gone off and you've increased by 100 beats per minute or more in the space of a very short period of time there. So I think anything you can be doing on the land, you just sort of almost visualize your heart rate coming up, so you actually feel a bit activated and stuff. using the breathing, breathing in, breathing out sort of thing, but actually sort of almost consciously wanting to feel like, even though you might be just totally static, stood there, feeling like you're actually working or visualizing what your arms will feel like out there in the water is really quite an important thing. And it's a lot of this depends as well on the temperature of the water. You're coming into the triathlon season over there in the UK, but I've just been told that even down in sunny Brighton, it's only 10 degrees Celsius down there.
Yeah,
so
getting into freezing.
Oh, you were there? Well, yeah, okay, yeah. So getting into the water down there is going to be really quite. That adds another level to this, right? Because as soon as you get into cold water, the response is normally to gasp and hold onto your breath, and it's the worst thing you want to be doing. So it's not a very nice thing to do, but if you can just go and pop your face in the water, splash a little bit of water on your face, it can actually just help to calm yourself down a little bit. And maybe even a little bit of water down the neck of the wetsuit, just to sort of like get yourself prepared and ready. But just from a physiological perspective, it's important to recognise that obviously when you're sucking in air, you're breathing in oxygen, carbon dioxide, other gases, sort of thing. But it's the oxygen that we want, that the body wants. And if you're holding onto your breath as that body's using up the oxygen, if you're not releasing the CO2, the carbon dioxide, the relative levels of that CO2 are actually climbing, and it's that which makes you panic and response, not so much the lack of oxygen. So if you can release the carbon dioxide, you're going to help to stave off a little bit of that panic and anxiety, and that's a really important thing, especially at the start of a race.
And do you emphasize at all whether you breathe out through your nose, through your mouth, through both? Is there any sort of best practice in terms of the breathing out?
Yes and no. I mean, the answer I would say is that if you're breathing out at all, then that's a good thing. It's much better than not breathing out. Some people prefer to exhale from the nose, and like I was saying before, you can hear yourself humming if you do that. Some people prefer to exhale from the mouth. Some people do a combination of the two. But as long as bubbles are coming out, then you'll be onto a little bit of a winner. And I think when we just talked there about going, from vertical to horizontal, and your heart rate going up by 100, maybe even 120 beats per minute in a very short space of time, what lots and lots of people do wrong is they set off in the start of a race way too fast. It's frantic, it's chaotic. In Ali and Johnny's book, Swim, Bike, Run, which is a fantastic read, I'm sure all of your listeners will have read it, but if you haven't, get it and read it, because it is bloody brilliant. They talk a lot about how at the start of a triathlon event, there's often a dead spot after around about 300 or 400 meters into the swim. And it's usually because people have gone off like the clappers, they blow up and then slow down. And that's at an elite level, but it also transpires all the way down to those people getting into it. And if you look at, if you have your Garmin on or your Apple Watch or whatever it might be, and you're sort of monitoring your pacing, sometimes people might think, I only slowed down by 10 seconds, 100. 10 seconds, 100 is a massive amount to slow down by, So it's really important that in that first 300 or 400 meters that you've got to go off quick. And there is some advantage, of course, to sort of like getting on amongst the feet of somebody a little bit faster than yourself. But if you are redlining right off the bat, it's going to take your heart rate and your breathing rate around about sort of minute and a half to catch up with the effort that you're actually putting in. And if you've gone off too quick, when that effort hits, okay, you're going to really feel like you're in oxygen.
I need to share. It's all learning. So I want to give people some hope here that if they really are terrified of doing a triathlon because of open water, I want to give them some hope. To that point, Paul, I am proud to say that I led the European Championships for 3 minutes. And then it was all over. It was all over. I finished, but I set off. It was my first ever representing GB. I was so pumped, and I did just that. I hit the buoy first. 72 guys lined up, first to the buoy, last out the swim. Because I just redlined. I just got so enthusiastic. I don't know where I'll get that. I was absolutely flat out, and I was just fixated on the first buoy. And max heart rate, 169, max heart rate by the first buoy in water, very bad idea. And I learned a huge amount about, as you just said, what I do and I've gone through a lot of pain and experience in getting it right, is I now start a little bit back. I draft off the first wave, and I start really slow. And I do that whole thinking of very slow breathing. I'm exhaling, I'm calm, and I feel like I'm doing half what my potential top speed is. And what I've found is by starting slower and building, I catch up everybody and I come out now top 10 of the swim. So that was an expensive lesson to learn because it was my debut and the Germans just saw, I'm going to draft off this guy. And then they just took me out. Literally on the first buoy, it was rinsed. I breaststroked the rest of the swim, but I didn't stop.
Yeah, yeah.
I've never not finished. And I've had 4 or 5 experiences like that. But I've never, and the other thing is, do try and roll on your back. Do try and relax. There is safety boats around you. The safety in triathlon, particularly in the water, is outstanding. And there's always someone close by to feel confident that, and you're in 90% of the time you're in a wetsuit, so you can float. You're not going to drown. And just that, as you said, rolling on your back, calming the heart rate. And then if you have to breaststroke to finish, focus on the finish. What I've done in those moments is I've thought, I'm going to finish whatever happens. Even if this swim takes me half the day, I know there's a cutoff. I've never, ever got there, but I am going to finish the swim. I'm good. And I start focusing on T1. I start going through my mind to distract at the moment that I'm in about, getting the wetsuit off, getting on the bike, and then really giving the bike the beans and the run at that point. So I hope people never get there in that situation. That's part of this podcast, is to help people share our experience to never have to be in that situation. But if you are, just concentrate on T1 as another point of view. So yes, great advice. Start slow, start easy, and build.
You can even see it with Ali and Johnny when they're racing. Like theoretically, they could be first to that buoy if they wanted to be. They are strong enough swimmers to do that, but they're always there in the top 4 or 5, basically. Just mixing it up. Never necessarily right on the front. They're usually on maybe Varga's feet, back in the day, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
but it's really tactical. And you might think, well, yeah, but that's Alistair and Jonathan Brownlee. Of course, they're going to be tactical about it because they're the best in the world. But you can be tactical about your own swimming as well. You can actually make sure that, okay, I know what my pace is at. I know where that red line is. I'm just going to take it just back a notch of that. I'm going to work on that breathing. And you will, like you said there, Pete, you went from first to 70 seconds sort of thing. But if you'd gone out maybe in 10th or 15th,
yes,
you might have been out of the water in the top 20, So, and that would have really made a big thing. And, I think over the years, I've been involved in triathlon now for nearly 30 years. Oh, God, I sound old. And, I remember coming into it, and I had a swimming coach, I had a biking coach, I had a running coach. And it wasn't until I got to Bath University, when I started studying sports and exercise science there, that I really started to understand just how you need to really think about triathlon as being a one sport thing. Yes, there are 3 disciplines involved with it, but you've got to do whatever it takes on that swim to get through the swim and not absolutely smash yourself. Because I see time and time again people, having, I want to knock off 30 seconds off my half Ironman time, or a minute off my Ironman time. And, that's a good thing to aim for, of course, sort of thing. Everyone wants to get a little bit faster. But if it's going to destroy you for the bike and the run, you've got to think a little bit more about the collective,
Yes, it's a long race, isn't it? It's a long race. Even sprint, it's still plenty of time. I've learned that. It's brilliant, the stuff that you've come up with. The warm-up routine before you get in. Get your heart rate, get your mind prepared for what's to come. It's also very different for a lot of people swimming in a wetsuit for the first time. They may have swum in the pool all their life, in their budgies or in their bathing costumes. But when you put a wetsuit on, it's even with the brilliant Hoob stuff that we've got in Brownlee Fitness. They're very flexible on the shoulders, but you're still restricted, and so immediately people might feel. So once again, any tips on? I think it's just practice, isn't it? Yeah, just get the wetsuit.
Well, no, let me give you a little anecdote on the old wetsuit. It's really interesting, right? Because when I'm doing these video analysis sessions, I always ask the first question asked when we sit down. I'm just getting the video prepared to go through the swimmer. I'll say to the swimmer, okay, you're going to see yourself on video in a moment, but what do you perceive you're going to see? What do you think you're going to look like? And it's probably my favorite question to ask somebody is, what do you perceive, or what is your perception of your stroke like? And I remember catching up with Ali and Johnny for a beer up in Bradford. I think it was in about 2015, I think it was. And I asked them that same question. I said to Johnny, I said, what's your perception of your stroke like? And am I allowed to swear, Pete? Or
it's sort of not the F-bomb. Or
well, I'll go over. I'll scope over that. But anyway, I said to Johnny, I said, what's your perception of your stroke like? And he said, well, it's rubbish. He was a little bit stronger in what he said, but he said, well, it's rubbish. And I said, well, it can't be rubbish. You know, you just won an Olympic bronze medal in London, sort of thing. And this was just before he went off and got an Olympic silver medal in Rio. But the reason he sort of perceived his stroke was rubbish is because his stroke and Alistair's stroke, they don't look like your classic smooth pool swimmer's stroke, basically. They're what I call a swinger. So they have a much straighter arm recovery, much higher arm lift over the top of the water.
Yeah.
And that's actually an advantage in the open water. So a lot of people think, you know, swimmers like the Brownlees, like Harry Wiltshire, who was the very first swimmer I ever started coaching, people think that they're succeeding despite their stroke. And yet I believe that they're succeeding because of their stroke and how well suited it is to swimming in the open water and swimming in the wetsuit. So let's just unpack that a little bit. You know, you might have heard, if you come from swimming a long running background of swimming, that, you know, you should try and lift the elbow really high and have the hand almost just trailing over the surface of the water here. Now, when it's flat and calm, like the pool, okay, if your fingertips are only just trailing over the surface, not too much of a problem. But if you rough choppy water swimming around other people, there's a big chance that hand's going to get slapped on the water or push you back or hit somebody else or what have you. So one of the primary reasons why the Brownlees, Harry Wiltshire, all the best open water swimmers and triathletes in the world tend to swim with a straighter arm recovery is because even with the best Hoob wetsuit, which is super flexible,
they're amazing. Yeah.
And they are amazing. Yeah, absolutely. If you try to actually force the elbow high, you're still working against something here, some neoprene here around the shoulders, as flexible as it might be. So it's actually much better to open out the angle at the elbow and lift the arm more up and over. This is what we call it a swinger. It looks like you're swinging your arm over the top of the water there. And it actually takes pressure off the shoulders. Now, in years gone by, anybody swimming with that straighter arm recovery, there's a lady, Olympic gold medalist and former world record holder, Janet Evans from the US in the 80s. That's exactly how she used to swim, was this straight arm recovery. And everyone said, oh, it looks terrible, looks horrible. She's just swinging her arms. But in the open water, that style, when you got your wetsuit on, can actually be really, really beneficial. And that's why the Brownlee brothers do it. So I was quite surprised that Johnny said to me his stroke was rubbish in his perception, because I was thinking, and I did say to him, I said, it can't be rubbish, mate. If you've got Olympic bronze medal and
it's another really amazing point you make, because it's comparing it to a swim style, which is totally a pool swim style, which is totally different to open water. I see, some of the greatest open water swimmers have got this barrel type effect. It's like they're rolling around. It's incredible, and the power that they generate is insane. But once again, I think that comes down to efficiency. Again, it's keeping that heart rate and that effort optimized in open water, and also cadence. I know not to get too technical, but I know.
I love getting technical. Don't
worry. Well, I mean, it's also to help our audience who are beginner triathletes, experienced triathletes. There's something for everyone here, but. When we do in Brownlee Fitness, when we do our VO2 max sessions, our cadence is high. I mean, I think Al and John have got a very, very high cadence. It's insane.
Low 90
compared to mine. Yeah, compared to mine. When I look at my analysis through the swim to move platform, and I look at Al's, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there's why we've got 2 Olympic champions, the greatest of all time. Cadence is insane. But the cadence, you would say, would jack the heart rate up, which is kind of counter to what we're talking about. That then comes back to technique and people getting into programs
believe it or not, and I will keep this as simple as possible.
Yes.
Just because Alistair and Jonathan swim with a higher cadence than what us mere mortals swim at doesn't necessarily mean to say that they're actually working a lot harder. There was actually a study done in 2010 which looked at manipulating people's stroke rate and looking at their response in terms of heart rate and oxygen consumption. Most people have been taught to try and make their stroke as long as possible and to glide as far as they can on each stroke, taking as few strokes per lap as possible. But when this study was done, what they did was they had these swimmers swimming in an endless pool at their threshold pace. So your threshold pace might be the speed that you swim at for 1,500 meters. Okay.
142, 143.
Perfect. You'd be at home in our squad here, Pete. That's it. That's our average. Believe it or not, that's exactly the average pace within our squad, mate. So you'd be well at home here.
Lovely.
So next time you come over, you've got to Got to come and join us. Anyway, so imagine you're in this endless pool, this flume tank, swimming at 142, 143 per 100. And then somebody told you, right, we're going to use this little tempo trainer. We're now going to slow your stroke rate down, and you've still got to swim at the same speed. Most people would assume that if you could stay at that speed, but with a slower stroke rate, it'd be taking less energy because you'd be traveling further on each stroke. But the results of this study showed the exact opposite of that. Right. What people end up doing is when they glide too long, especially in a triathlon, open water swimming event, if they glide too long, they end up kicking a lot harder just to compensate. And it's the strength of the kick that's sending the heart rate and oxygen consumption through the roof. So just snapping back to Alice and Jonathan, these guys swim with what we call a 2-beat leg kick, which looks like they're hardly kicking at all. And that's what helps them to keep their heart rate down. That's why they don't get into the panic with the heart rate going through the roof. Conversely, if somebody mid-pack has been watching a load of YouTube videos, try and lengthen out your stroke, glide more, and they've got this massively strong leg kick, and yes, they might be taking half as many strokes as Jonathan Brownlee goes around the course, but it doesn't matter. If they're pushing really, really strongly with the legs, the heart rate is going to be absolutely through the roof. So
brilliant.
It's really important. Really important to sort of like recognize that, because it's easy to look at the stroke rate of the Brownlees and think, they're pushing it really hard. Their
heart rate maximal.
Actual fact, it's not. The world's best open water swimmer at this point in time is also the world's best 1500 pool swimmer, a guy called Gregorio Paltrinieri. And if you think that the Brownlee brothers hardly kick, this guy's got like literally a 1-beat leg kick, and his stroke rate's around about 100 strokes per minute. And he does that for 10 kilometers in the open water. He's my odds-on favorite to win Paris for the Olympics next year, which would be great. But there's a video doing the rounds at the moment on Instagram and Twitter and stuff of Gregorio Paltrinieri swimming next to Florian Welbeck. And Florian is his stroke length is pretty much twice of what Gregorio Paltrinieri's is. Florian looks a lot nicer than Gregorio, but Gregorio is the better swimmer, especially in the open water. So it's really interesting just to sort of see.
Amazing. That is phenomenal insight, because overkicking, once again, too much exertion on the kick will rise the heart rate, could get someone into trouble in that open water swim.
Absolutely. And the final point on that, Pete, is that affects swimmers of all levels. I was very lucky last year to be coaching Chelsea Sidaro, who went on and won the Hawaii Ironman World Championship. Phenomenal. So I met up with her in Mallorca and we did a video analysis session. So she's actually coached by one of my best mates, Dan Plews, in New Zealand for swim, bike, and run. But he said, "Look, can you do a video analysis session with Chelsea and work out what she needs to do?" Because they were finding, and Dan's super scientific, they were finding that when she was getting out of the swim, she's just cooked for the first 5 or 10 Ks on the bike, which is, obviously quite a key point to make sure she's actually there with the group, not drafting, but bearing in and amongst it. And she jumped in, we did this video. And when she was doing her warm-up pace, she had this beautiful 2-beat leg sweep, just like Ali and Johnny have got. Hardly any effort from the legs, really high stroke rate. And I said, "Okay, Chelsea, show me your race stroke, what you do for a half Ironman." So she set off, pushed off, stroke length increased, and the kicking rate increased, just as I've been saying there, because she was trying to glide her way down the pool. And it's because somebody told her that she needed to make her stroke longer and with a stroke rate slower, that when she switched into race mode, ironically enough, she'd actually slowed the rate down, but increased the kicking. So what we did was we actually pressed reverse, got her to go back to almost her warm-up style, increased the stroke rate, kept that 2-beat leg kick. And then lo and behold, the next race she did the following weekend was Ironman Hamburg. First out of the water, fastest debutant female Ironman time in history. And then in October, she goes and wins the Hawaii Ironman World Championships. And it's not so much because she became a faster swimmer. It's because she was able to then get out on the bike and run and do the damage where she is really strong.
Yeah, amazing. Once again, great insight. And I'm pleased to say with our partnership, all this expertise, we're going to be distilling down to our squad and beyond. So that'd be phenomenal. That was a brilliant conversation. We're at the 30-minute mark and we have a tradition here. So thank you for all those wonderful insights. There'll be more episodes to come. We'll be sharing this with the Brownlee Fitness community. There were some amazing insights there. So we have a tradition, a closing tradition of the podcast where I ask you a question and that question is, if you were to meet someone, past or present, anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
So is this somebody I haven't met before?
It could be anyone. It could be past or present, alive, or passed away. It could be anyone, but it's someone that you would love to meet and spend some time with. And, and why would you want to meet that person?
I'd love to finish the beer with Ali and Johnny, I've got to say. So, yeah, we had that very
you never finished it. You never finished it.
Never finished it. No, it was always going to be too short, and I'd just love to spend some time in their company, just chewing the fat a little bit. And I know it sounds a little bit cliche to say that on the Brownlee Fitness show, but I emigrated here 20 years ago, right? And I was prior to leaving, I was lucky to be on the world-class triathlon program there in the UK. And I never quite made it as a triathlete. I did all right, had some good results and stuff like that, but I never really felt like I met my potential. And I moved over here, got into the coaching. Coaching's my passion and stuff. And I've got to say, I feel at times, especially during the pandemic, I felt very far removed from the UK, so far away and all that sort of stuff. But following the Brownlee brothers' performances over the years and what they have genuinely done for the sport, it's been phenomenal. And when I went to watch them actually race in London in 2012, in Hyde Park, there's like 750,000 people there, or maybe more, I don't know. But the buzz and excitement around that, it made me feel super proud to be British, and more importantly, super proud to be from Yorkshire as well. So, it was a short meeting there back in Bradford a little while ago, but those are the two guys.
There's two things there. One, we can definitely make that happen as we're partners now anyway, so we can get that beer back on the table. And I have to echo what you say. It's a privilege of a lifetime to be working with them and the wider team, Andy, Bucko, Nick, the whole Brownlee Fitness team. And it's things and it's experiences like this and knowledge like this that we, as you say, this is their legacy, their training legacy. So we're here to pick that up, all that great expertise and share it with the world. Paul, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been amazing having you on the show. And
no problem, Pete.
We'll be announcing some great stuff, working together with your technology and our technology over the coming months. So we're excited about that too. So once again, thank you so much and look forward to getting you back on the show shortly.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Thanks for listening to the show. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to get instantly notified of new episodes. And we have an exciting lineup of guests planned, all brought to you to help you with your triathlon journey.